We're going to go into our first panel session, event models and levels of maturity. It's all about expansion, contraction, maintenance, and collaboration. To chair that panel, I'd like you to please welcome Mr. Rashid Toefy from the MCI. He'll be chairing, and it's going to be extremely exciting as he works with, from the Open Book Festival, Miss Frankie Murrey. I think she's going to be making her way up onto stage shortly. And ladies and gentlemen, by the way, if you do not applaud all our panelists, lunch will be cancelled. Also, please, there we go. Our operations director from the Design Indaba, Leshni Shah. Thank you for joining us, Leshni. Just in time. She's the race director of the ABSA Cape Epic. It is Kati Csak. She was going to cycle onto the stage, but apparently the Century City Convention Center said no mountain bikes inside. So she's parked hers outside. She will be giving lessons on single track during lunch. And then the head of sport for the independent media, welcome Jermaine Craig.
I think when I thought about speaking about how the world of events are changing, I needed to take one step back. Events are simply the things that happen between what consumers want and what products are trying to offer them. And somewhere in the middle of that space is where we create events, we create experiences that help people get what they want. So before we start speaking about how events are evolving, and we're going to have the movers and the shakers of the industry here, I wanted you to just think about how our world is changing. And I'm picking up a little bit of what Tim said. We're living in a changed world where the thing that's really happening is that we're having disruption in every field. You know, so while there's always been bed and breakfasts around the world, we've never had something like Airbnb come along, take on the world's hotel chains without owning a single hotel room. Or Uber. We've always had the ability. When I lived in Holland a few years ago, people used to do car shares, but the idea that you could actually live in a city, not own a vehicle, and actually get around on an Uber is a reality. So what I wanted you to think about today when we talk about how events are changing is, what is going to be our disruption? What's going to be the big disruption that starts to change the way we look at our industry? So this idea of some sort of collective consumption is going to the nth degree. I don't know if you know that the latest version of that is where people are having the idea of an Uber, but with shared homes. So I've just seen the latest version of this happening in China, where you have your bedroom, you have your one room, and young people are actually saying, I'm happy to just pay for a space which is my bedroom, but I share my lounge, my jacuzzi, my TV room with 20, 30 other people. I don't know if you can imagine that. I mean, some of us are very comfortable with our space, with our lounge. But again, it takes the idea of kind of shared living to the whole next level. So keep that in the back of your mind when we start to talk about how our world of events are moving and shaking. So I came back from China last week. And the scale of China. Who have you been to China before? Anybody? So a number of us have maybe experienced it, but it's something that absolutely shakes you, the scale of it. I mean, the city of Shanghai has 23 million people, which is half of South Africa's population in one city, you know. And I was in a convention center that's 40 times the size of this event venue. So it's a bit like having a convention center which is the whole of Century City under one roof, or the whole of downtown Cape Town. So when the CTICC recently doubled its size from 10,000 square meters to 20, they're just opening the latest conventions center in Shanghai, which is 500,000 square meters, which is effectively like the CTICC, kind of all the way to Woodstock, all the way to Oranjezig, under one roof. You know? So on a scale level, as Tim said as well, we can't compete with the world, but I don't think we have to. I think what we need to be doing is looking at our industry and saying, how do we create events that are relevant to our market, that are filling those niches of what people really want in our country and in our system. So there is a change. There's a change in the way people are consuming products, how people are consuming books, how people are consuming fashion. All of you or some of you are playing in that space. But there's one thing that remains the same, and I head up an organization called MCI in South Africa, and our mantra is that when people come together, magic happens. And I think you can all relate to me that if we were sitting at home watching YouTube in our pajamas and our own little, funny mug, trying to experience this event, it simply wouldn't be the same. Because the laughs that you feel, the sharing a drink, the having a coffee or a beer with someone after an event, that's actually where the magic happens, where people are face to face. So I personally think, just to set the scene, I think there is a disruption happening. There are digital events, there are hybrid events, but I don't think it's ever going to change the need for people to actually get together, to experience each other, and to really start to still have that ultimate experience of getting together and being face to face. So, all right, so I'm going to sit back down again, and I'm going to hand over. Are you first up? I'm just going to give you the clicker.
Okay.
So what we're going to do, the way we're going to do this is we're going to ask 5 minutes from each of our panelists to give you an overview of their particular event, and it's from the perspective of how events are evolving, and for us to all learn, and it's really going to be interactive. I'm going to step out into the audience. I'm going to get you involved, because the power of events like this is not just listening to the 4 or 5 experts on the stage, but you heard this morning that the people in this room are really the experts in this field. And I'd really like us to get out there, Paul. I hope we haven't killed the question and answer section of this part of the program, but I really want to get out there and I want to engage with you and to fire away, start jotting down what you'd like to ask. So over to our first panelist.
Hi, I'm Frankie from Open Book Festival. It's a 5-day literary festival that happens each September. It's a passion. Anyone who's involved in books knows that you're never going to make a huge amount of money, but you do experience a lot. It's an amazing field to be working in. Our logo was designed by a comic book artist who works in Cape Town called Louis Tolasana. The character's name is Philo, and we all fell completely in love with him over the past year. Just getting straight into it with audience, when we first started the festival back in 2011, we were thinking very clearly about what the typical book festival audience looks like in a global world. Who feels welcome? Who feels that they can access it? Who feels like they're interested in being part of it? And then we had to think about how much that matched what audience we were after. And we saw that there was a discrepancy the way people were viewing a typical book festival audience versus what we wanted to see. Open Book is an international book festival. We invite between 20 and 30 international writers each year. But we didn't want people to come to the festival and feel like this could have happened anywhere. We wanted people to feel like this could only happen in Cape Town. Our audience, as a result, needs to be an audience that feels Cape Town. It needs to be young. It needs to be diverse. And that is going to make a huge difference to any kind of strategy that we put in place. We were also thinking about how many people we wanted and how many we can cope with. So initially, when we were first talking about it, the event looked like it was going to be about 60 events over the 5 days. Very quickly, we realized that it was going to be over 100 events over the 5 days, and we realized that we could actually cope with more than we had anticipated. So the getting there, the events are key to this. We've all been talking about how people are looking for experiences rather than product, and the book festival does that beautifully, really. The experiences that you can collect at a book festival, it's not a particular subject. The range of experiences up for offer are just mind-blowing. But they have to be meaningful to the audience that we're talking about. And so when we're curating the program, when we're putting it together, we put a lot of thought into what we're doing to make sure that it appeals to as many people as we can appeal to. We also try and bring something new to the program each year. Keeping our program fresh is incredibly important, while at the same time maintaining a sort of loyal customer, or not customer, but audience base. again, when we're talking about who we're going to invite, the range of authors that we consider is vast. When you think that we invite between 20 and 30 internationals, on the local front, we're looking at closer to 180 people that we include as participants. So the people that we include are incredibly important, and we put a lot of thought into it, particularly on the local side, because obviously there are a lot of people who also want to be involved. In terms of finding new people to join us, because we are trying to grow our audience base constantly, the partners and sponsors that we work with are crucial. Through them, we get to meet new people, we get to try new things. So it's all about keeping something fresh, but at the same time, working with people who you can learn from and who you can also share skills with. It's a very exciting thing. The marketing of the festival is something that, if you are wanting to grow your audience, getting your information about the festival out into the different communities that you're trying to engage with is not always the easiest thing. And what we've also found in terms of reaching people in a meaningful way is that you can't just rely on traditional media. You need to think about how to get stuff through word of mouth, through trustworthy sources, and often your partners play a very, very important role there. That leads into the trust relationship that I'm talking about. If we're wanting to continue keeping audiences engaged with the festival and bring in new people, we've got to show that we are trustworthy people to work with, that we do great events, that we treat people well, that we create a space where meaningful conversation can take place. The learning and flexibility thing, it's one of the things that's very difficult, I think, for a lot of us is the making of mistakes. And it's that thing of don't set out to make a mistake, but a mistake is going to crop up. What you've got to show people in terms of keeping that trust is that the same mistake isn't going to happen year after year, that you will actually be making a new mistake next year, and they should be prepared for it. We've put a lot of investment, I'll just do one more, a lot of investment into our audience. This is in terms of transport, tickets, things like that, but it's also around doing pilot projects through the year, engaging with them through the year, just finding new groups to work with constantly.
And we're talking about the fact that events can be at different levels of maturity, or just somewhere else in the sort of life cycle of an event. And these are very general. While we've asked you to speak, I think it was Frankie, on the idea of an event that's expanding, Leshni to speak on an event that's kind of contracting, but I think you'll hear her perspective on that. Katie speaking about an event that's kind of maintaining, and then Jermaine talking about the power of collaboration. But I think you each know that at every stage of your event, it's going through various phases. But Leshni, I've had the unique experience of seeing her grow an event from and expand into the entire convention center. And here you are now doing something different. So thanks for being here.
It's quite interesting that I've been asked to talk about contracting an event, but I think the decision we made to change our event was not about contraction, but to address some of the increasing other opportunities that are opening up in the marketplace, and particularly something that Tim mentioned, and that is events are becoming a lot more experiential. And that is the direction that we've chosen to go. And if there's time, I'll perhaps talk to that a little bit more. But I'd like to kick off and perhaps give you some indication as to why we chose to terminate, perhaps, the Design Indaba Expo. I'm starting with the video just in case you don't remember the Design Indaba Expo. This is from 2014.
I'm always so impressed with South Africa's creativity, and this is one of the great venues to see what's happening.
This is one of the best Design Indaba Expos that I've been to. I feel like 2014 everyone's really outdone themselves, and it's been a real pleasure to be here. I think of all years to be at the Design Indaba, this is the one.
It has been overwhelming, and on the last day we have so little stock left to sell. It's almost an injustice to the people who've come on the last day. It's a fantastic platform to launch, especially when you're a smaller company, you don't have the budgets, the marketing budgets that the corporates have. So this is a fantastic platform to expose the product, and to sell the product.
So on the back of that, it's quite difficult to try and tell you why we chose to stop something that seemed to be so successful, and in terms of doing what we'd set out to do. And I think the best way to address this is by looking at the objectives that we'd set for the Design Indaba Expo when we first started. And our first and primary reason was to grow the local creative industries as a driver of economic growth. This was on the back of the highly successful Design Indaba conference, which had already been going for about 6 or 7 years. As some of you who may have attended the conference would know, that it's a highly inspirational platform. It taps into the global zeitgeist of what's going on in the creative sector around the world. And we felt that we had to do something to also grow that locally, and hence the launch of the Design Indaba Expo. It proved to deliver in terms of it being an economic growth incentive. In the 4 years that we measured it, which was in the last 4 years, it ran for 11 years, we contributed over 2.3 billion to the economy. And this was largely driven off sales of the Design Indaba Expo floor, as well as exports from our exhibitors. The second thing was we wanted to provide local and international market access to small and emerging businesses. And I think from some of the things that you saw in the video, the Design Indaba Expo did that exceedingly well. Annually, we had over 750 buyers, of which between 150 to 200 were international. And interestingly, they brought themselves out. We made no effort, apart from marketing our event, to get them there. The third was to provide a launch pad for young and emerging designers, and that was through our Emerging Creatives program, which I think people really enjoyed, and I'll touch on that a little later, but it's something that we decided to continue to do. And the third thing was to provide an impetus for innovation. The Design Indaba is all about creativity, and one of the things we realized is if there's anything that drives industry, it happens on the back of innovation. So those were the reasons we started it. Why did we decide to stop? Our brand stands for a better world through creativity, and on the back of that, innovation was critically important to us. And one of the things that we felt was that the expo was starting, the exhibitors were not innovating to the extent that we were hoping. And we were starting to get comments like, we've seen this last year, we saw this 2 years ago, there's nothing new. And for us, that was beginning to damage our brand. So that was something that was critically important for us, because our brand is a global brand. It doesn't just operate in the local market. The second thing that has happened is that there's been a huge proliferation of retail exposure for our exhibitors. A lot of you are probably familiar with the Watershed. Take a walk down Long Street, Loop Street, you'll see a lot of the Design Indaba exhibitors have retail outlets there. And we felt that it didn't make sense for us to bring them together in the convention center for 3 days a year when all of this was out there anyway and people had that access. I also didn't mention that one of the reasons we felt that the rate of innovation was slowing was because there was quite a proliferation, apart from the retail presence, there were a lot of markets, like the Biscuit Mill, quite a few night markets, that were also opening up. And I think on the back of that, the small businesses that exhibited at the Design Indaba Expo were having, well, not difficulty, but were struggling to innovate while keeping up with the production that was required to service all of those different markets. And the third thing was that we found that there were probably more cost-effective ways of achieving similar objectives. The model that we had was not a turnover-based model. All we did was we rented space and we let out the stands on the expo floor. So in terms of the impact to our business financially, it was very small because the expo did not actually do terribly well financially for us. So finally, what have we done and how have we changed our model? One of the things that we've done is we've turned our website into a full-on design publication. It now has over 200 visitors annually, of which 30% of the visitors are African, 70% are international. And we found that this is a far more effective way of taking South African and African design to the rest of the world. And I think that was something that Tim was talking about earlier. Rashid mentioned it as well. That's part of the disruption that's happening in the industry. And I think models like expos are becoming outdated because they are better and more effective ways of achieving the same objectives. In terms of our conference, it's becoming a lot more of a festival of creativity, offering more experiential opportunities as opposed to just being a conference. And then the third thing is that we've chosen to continue our Emerging Creatives program and Most Beautiful Object, and we now tour that nationally in the 3 weeks to the lead up to our event. So I think, in conclusion, I think the most important thing was removing the expo was not about contracting the business model. It was just about changing and finding more effective and efficient ways of doing things.
Thank you, Leshni. Katie, fire away.
So I was asked to talk primarily about the maintenance of the event. As many of you will know, the ABSA Cape Epic 8-day mountain bike stage race, we are oversubscribed. We have 1,300 participants every year, and we really can't keep growing the event from a participant's point of view. So how do we maintain this? A key thing for us is certainly to keep the nature of the event very aspirational, but with it being aspirational, that also means it needs to be achievable and it needs to be accessible. But at the same time, to maintain that exclusivity of the event. So we are often asked, why don't you copy the business model of other events like the Wines to Wells and add on a second and third event? That simply wouldn't work for us based on the way our business model works, that it's not purely income driven from the participants, but that there's a very big focus on the sponsor element and on involving the public and not just the participants. But saying that rider experience is always at the absolute core of our brand. So whatever we do, it is about maintaining that experience for the rider. Does it add to his experience? Do we keep the level there? And as such, it's really a matter of setting the benchmark in the industry of what an 8-day mountain bike stage race, of what mountain biking as such can actually be. We do that with the help of our sponsors, who are not just giving money as the sponsors to get their brand out there, but who are really getting involved in the event as such, helping us to push the boundaries, adding service levels, and just giving that extra rider experience back. In terms of the growth, I said from our business model, what is very important to us is the media exposure. So while we can't grow the 1,300 participants in the race, for sure we can grow our media exposure through TV productions, online distributions. We actively distribute ourselves, and as such we're engaging with the spectators, because that market is basically limitless. So the spectators, again, you can differentiate between the spectators that are coming to the event. So in the early days, we didn't really provide infrastructure for spectators and supporters. But now what we found, because again of the aspirational nature of the event and it's being so important that you complete it, you want to have your support at the event. So most teams these days travel with at least 2 supporters that follow the event. So we've put the infrastructure in place for those supporters to be at the event. We engage with them throughout the event, whether they are at the event themselves, they come to the spectator points, as well as, again, providing the online platforms that even if you're sitting in a different part of the world, you can actually follow your friends and family that are riding the race. Then it's also about engagement with everybody else. So we've got about 25 full-time staff working on the event for 1 event a year. But it is really not only happening once a year. We have a year-round engagement with our sponsors, with the crew. We're hosting rider workshops. We have the route launch. So it's really about completing that 12-month cycle as opposed to just having 1 event. And then it's really also looking at synergies in terms of how do you grow the sport further. So we are currently pitching to host the 2018 Mountain Bike World Cup. That would be happening 1 week before the Cape Epic as such. And again, it would literally kick off the global mountain bike season in the Western Cape, bringing more athletes of a very high standard to the Western Cape, bringing additional media in here, and that piggybacks straight off then going into the Cape Epic and as such achieving those synergies. Then most of you are aware that we've been talking a lot about the Chinese already. So yes, we also have been gobbled up by the Chinese. We have been acquired because Ironman or WTC, which is part of the Wonder Sports Group, decided or has identified mountain biking as a key strategy for and seen the opportunity for global growth there. So what they want to do is use the Cape Epic basically as the blueprint to roll out an international series, which we are going to be driving. I can't tell you too much about it yet, as the payoff line says, anything is possible, even though it was meant in a different way. But again, with using the blueprint as such, it is a matter where we're currently looking at introducing that series, which would bring in qualifiers, which would give the Cape Epic as such complete international exposure, and again, translate that back to here in the Western Cape, and as such, elevate the Cape Epic as the pinnacle event of that series, which speaks back to the aspirational nature that I started off on. And with that, my 5 minutes are up, and I'm done.
Well done, you're spot on. You're bang on. Jermaine, over to you. Let's go straight into your perspective.
Morning, Rashid. Morning, everyone. I think, just back one if I can. I think driven to drink. It's tough selling newspapers in this day and age. But for us, one of the things that governs our company at the moment is the BAR principle. For us as a media group, brand, audience, revenue is important in what we do going forward. We still have a very strong footprint. We still have over 20 of the country's most loved newspaper brands around the country, over 6 million daily readers and weekly readers, and a strong IOL presence as well. Also, as we're a strong national entity, but our regional strength is also very important. We touch over 35% of the Cape's population every day through the likes of the Cape Times, the Cape Argus, the Daily Voice, and also the Plainsman, Athlone News. Those are all us. But for us, we've got to make that count a bit more. So for us, we do have a strong partnership through our Sekundjalo holding company with AEI, host of the Cape Town International Jazz Festival. But there's so much more we can still do around that. I think that's a great event, but as a proud Cape Townian who loves his jazz, I don't feel the great jazz culture in the city anymore. I think that's something we could be working on year-round through our lifestyle unit. And as we restructure our traditional media company, we're very positive still, but we do need to look at a number of different ways of maintaining and sustaining our business. And as I said, anything that we approach in terms of the event space has to be governed by those three principles. And increasingly is an important revenue stream for us as well. Greg Leroux is the head of our events team in the front there as well. He's been appointed this year in that role to look at how can we approach and engage with new events. We can't merely be media partners anymore with our name on the event logo. But we also have to understand we have to show value and return to sponsors, advertisers, and event partners. I think the Cape Town Cycle Tour, very proud of what that event has done for our Cape Argus brand over many years, over 40 years now, almost 40 years. But for us, how can we continue to leverage on that? We're very proud of the work we've done this year with Kaiser Chiefs, for instance, in the event space. When they came to Cape Town last season for the Cape of Love and Peace 3 games, we could go to a client like that in the event space and we could reach new audiences for them with the Cape Argus going into a different LSM audience, but also going through our Vukani into Kailicha, Langa, Mitchell's Play in Athlone with that brand. And I think it was very successful, average about 25,000 crowd last year. As they moved to Durban, disappointingly this year from a Cape Town perspective, but we worked with them on our Zulu language publication, Isolezwe, that has a very strong 1.2 million footprint. And we worked seamlessly with an event partner like Kaiser Chiefs in KZN. And there they had 45,000 people at a league match. And for a first of its kind, for a brand like theirs, we produced a purely Zulu publication for them. As big as they are, they've never done that. So we have to find ways of how we use our footprint more effectively. And like I said, this year we launched an events unit and also various new business units to look at the event space. One of the events we introduced last year, we're looking to grow, is the Cape Argus Sports Show. Again, a great chance for us to work with one of our big advertisers, ShopRite. We work with the Basson family on this one. And we're quite excited about it. I know we're tight on time, Rashid, if I can just give it a little bit of a sense of that event.
stand up, never ran. We the family, loyalty never change up. Been down since day one, look at where we came from. Jumping out on anybody who try to say something. One thing about it, got a problem, I got the same one. Shot, everything rides on tonight. Even if I've got 3 strikes, I'ma go for it. This moment, we own it. Around the got to be played with because it can get dangerous. See, I rise people alive with this moment, we own it.
I think we could probably cut it there, guys. I think, Rashid, very exciting event for us, you know, partnering closely. But last year we brought the Jetman. I don't know if you guys have seen the Dubai Jetman going through, working with Emirates. We brought him last year, looking to see how he could potentially fly through the skies of Cape Town for a major global exposure of the city. Guys like Nick de Wet, Rian Munster's Extreme Speaker Box. But Rashid, for us, very humble for start, but I think we're quite positive about the potential for this event. And working very closely with a range of different partners, the Freestyle Gravity Clash guys, the Grind, all events that have got a very strong niche footprint. Pump Track, for instance, the Fives football has over 2,000 competitive teams, but bringing it all into a very strong, big, broad sort of event next year.
Well, thank you.
Rashid, just a little bit of a sense of how we're evolving as a media company into a company very much more aggressively involved in the event space.
Thank you. No, I think the power of that is what you've done there, as many of you have done in your events world, is create the umbrella under which other events can thrive, where events come together and converge. So, Paul, I'm assuming we still have some time to go ahead and ask some questions, right?
Indeed we do. I've actually got the first question.
Do you have a question?
I've got the first question. Are we finding a greater tendency to just look at what's happening around the world and imitate? Or are we taking what we have and taking it to the world?
I think that, you know, when I look at what's getting published around the world, I read a lot. And the books that have excited me most in the course of this past year have been by South Africans. And one of the core goals of the festival is to promote our local writers to an international audience. And that's why the international guests who join us are that important, because they take those books away with them and they recommend them to their friends. I think it's vital.
Something I think when we started, and I think it was Lorraine that showed, we started in 1995 when there were very few events like this. And when we launched our expo, there were very few design weeks globally. And in the last few years, there's been a proliferation of them. And a lot of them, interestingly, have been developed around our model. And interestingly, Design Indaba, while it happens in Cape Town and in very much an emerging economy, where design is still very small as an industry, it has sort of been a leading event in terms of its positioning globally. And we get a lot of delegates every year. In fact, we get about 200 or 300 international delegates who have arrived to copy the event to some extent in their own countries. We've also been invited to collaborate with some of those events internationally.
I think Cape Town has shown that it can create events that other people have gone and copied.
I think that's important.
I wanted to ask you, Katie, just, you know, not many events have the luxury, like the Jazz Festival is a bit like that, where they fully booked, 35,000 people have booked and paid up 3 months in advance. How do you then still keep your brand, your brand owners energized when you know you're going to be fully booked and you know that that's not an issue? Yeah, so you're at that stage, that luxury stage where you need to keep growing even though you've fully subscribed.
I think it ties actually exactly into the question that Paul's asked about innovation. While we might not have been the first mountain bike scene on the mountain bike race on the scene, it is about getting to the forefront, innovating, keeping to innovate, and never being happy with the status quo and always pushing the boundaries. And you know, now it's what I tried to bring across earlier is like we cannot grow the participant numbers of the ABSA Cape Epic as such. But all the peripheral stuff that goes with it, you can grow. You can grow your audience, you know, to a global audience from just the South African audience. With Ironman, there's now a fantastic opportunity to take our innovations, what we've created as that blueprint, to roll it out globally. And again, all of that feeds back into you're growing your brand value, and that is not grown by the actual riders in the race, while they are our focus and they will always remain our focus, the growth of the business as such certainly lies in making things global.
Traditional ways to create platforms for brands to expose themselves used to be print and even online, and you're going beyond that. You can help events grow and move into a different space by supporting in a much deeper way. I just want to ask you, Jermaine, how does that change your role as a media player if you decided to be an events player? You know?
I think, Rashid, we accept that we also, if people are going to advertise or sponsor our publications, we have to show value as well. The Kaiser Chiefs example I used, when they went to KZN, we know there's a strong Zulu support base of theirs and there's a strong publication of ours, but we have 130,000 Kaiser Chiefs fans on an SMS database with our Zulu language newspaper. So just to showcase the value for a client, we know that we've got to be effective, we've got to add value. It's not going to be just a matter of, advertise and they will come. You've got to really engage audiences, and that's why we've gone the lifestyle route or the business unit route to really hone in on the audiences.